Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it's Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And the last couple of weeks, I've had very limited or stunted data breaches due to the insane amount of travel I've got. And truth be told, I'm actually recording this on Saturday, June 22nd, because, well, travel again. But this week in data breaches was absolutely nuts. And before we dive in, I want to say absolutely thank you to Jay Dance, Jacqueline Wolf, Harvey Reingold, Steve Goodman, and Bill Sorensen. Thank you very much for sending in these tips, and please keep sending them my way as well. And with that, let's start out huge, the continued fallout from the Snowflake situation. Now, if you recall, I've been talking about Snowflakes even 2 weeks ago. My limited breaches of the week was all about Snowflake. They are essentially a data storage provider system that a lot of major companies are using. And we learned a few weeks ago, that Ticketmaster, aka Live Nation, had 500 million of their customers, including myself and probably anybody watching or listening to this, essentially breached. But now we are starting to see a lot more action over the last couple of weeks. And so let's rip that Band-Aid off straight out of the gate, because following other organizations and more have declared, but these are the ones that were readily available. The Los Angeles Unified School District for 26 million students, 24,000 teachers, and 500 staff. Santander, the massive bank, which I did mention a couple of weeks ago, is now disclosing that 12,000 of their employees worldwide have been hit. LendingTree is also updating as well. Advanced Auto Parts, there's a whole bunch that have come out with this, but those are the big ones. But on top of this, here's what else is going on. The attackers who targeted Snowflake customers are now reportedly demanding ransom payments ranging from $300,000 US up to $5 million, depending on essentially who it is. And right now we have confirmation for as many as 10 breached companies that have now been caught in the dark web. Now, the hacking group known as UNC 5537 accessed the Snowflake accounts of approximately 165 customers and stole valuable data. That's according to Bloomberg's reporting on Monday, June 17. Now, when I talked about this a few weeks ago, Snowflake said, well, it didn't necessarily look like us. We think it might have been just like a dev production environment. And here we are. Now we've got major news publications saying, yeah, they got hit hard. Now, the group has begun auctioning stolen data on illegal online forums in an attempt to pressure the affected companies into making ransom payments. And so the attackers are likely to continue their extortion attempts, obviously. And if they have access to 165 companies and the data, a copy of the data, well, that's 165 companies that are going to be extorted. So that is a huge problem. If you used Snowflake for all of your, and I say used because odds are you're probably not anytime soon, just heads up to you. You are definitely on the radar in some way, shape, or form. Moving on. Let's give you a quick update on Change Healthcare. If you recall, basically like 1/3 of all pharmacy patients in the United States about a month or two ago could not access their prescriptions wherever their pharmacies were because Change Healthcare went down. They're owned by United Healthcare, and the update is simply that they've now officially started notifying victims. So if you use Change Healthcare, aka United Healthcare, be on the lookout for that, because there may be instructions and you may be entitled to things like free credit monitoring out of the gate, not to mention the $800 billion worth of lawsuits that are going to come out of this one. Moving on, Kaiser Permanente also needs an update as well, because we now know that they told customers and regulators about their data breach months after they were legally required to do so. In other words, they dragged their feet way longer than they should have. Now, in a letter to customers dated May 31st, they said that they determined on October 25th of last year that they might have been transmitting customer data to Google, Microsoft, and X, aka Twitter, via tracking technology. So when you go to their portal for Kaiser, and a ton of major healthcare companies were caught up in this late last year, essentially when you go in, Facebook or Microsoft or Google or Twitter or whatever could scrape that information. So if you're going for your colonoscopy, whatever it is, that's kind of sensitive, then boom, now they know. So the Oakland-based healthcare giant had not previously given a date for when they discovered the leak, and that's why I'm talking about it now. So heads up to you. Odds are Kaiser's going to get sued as well. Moving on, let's talk about Debt Collector Financial Business and Consumer Solutions, or FBCS. And quite frankly, nobody sheds a tear typically when debt collectors get compromised. But what gets compromised when you compromise a debt collector? people in debt, and that's obviously a horrible thing. So they just got impacted by a massive data breach that is affecting around 3 million or so, and the initial tally that was mentioned was 1.9, which the company raised to 3 million this month in June 2024. Now, the data breach leaked a treasure trove of customer data, including full name, social security number, date of birth, driver's license or ID, all that kind of stuff, and they are now in the process of informing everybody. So heads up to you, if you unfortunately have a debt with financial, business, and consumer solutions, you definitely want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about major U.S. life insurance provider Global Life. They've launched an investigation into the potential compromise of its consumer and policyholder information following a breach that they identified in their web portal about a week or two ago. Now, they took immediate action to basically shut down the portal, all that kind of stuff. They also started filing with the Security and Exchange Commission. It's called an 8K report. And so that's all we've got right now. But if you use Globe Life for all your U.S. life insurance needs, you're definitely going to want to check in at some point. Moving on, let's head back to Los Angeles. This isn't Snowflake as far as I can tell, but we're going to talk about the LA County Department of Public Health because they experienced and announced that they experienced a phishing attack between February 19th and 20th of this year in which a threat actor gained access to essentially the credentials of 53 public health employees. Now, the credentials were obtained through a phishing email that ultimately allowed the threat actor to compromise the personal information of more than 200,000 individuals. So if you're a Los Angelino that uses the Department of Public Health, you definitely want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Doxim, the company Doxim, D-O-X-I-M. On June 13th, they filed with Montana after discovering a non-authorized party was able to access files containing confidential information on their network. We're talking name, address, social security, and account numbers. They are now sending out letters as well. So if you use Doxim for all your Doxim needs, whatever the heck they do, heads up to you. Moving on, let's head on over to the Philippines and talk about Jollibee Foods or Jollibee Foods. That's actually probably the better way to pronounce that because that looks more accurate. Now, they are the largest restaurant operator in the entire country, and all we know thus far is that they're investigating an alleged data breach that could potentially affect millions of Filipinos. So this obviously is a major, major issue, especially if they are the largest operating. I mean, think about McDonald's here. If all of them got breached and all our credit cards got hit, because at some point everybody's been doing McDonald's like in the last year or two, right? So heads up to you, Jollibee Foods. If you are a patron or an employee, it's coming for you, and good luck, Philippines. Moving on, let's talk about Signature Performance. Now, on June 10th, Signature Performance filed with Massachusetts on behalf of UNC Health Southeastern after learning that a data breach at basically Signature Performance leaked confidential UNC Health Southeastern patient data. So, typical supply chain breach. Now, in this notice, Signature explained that the incident resulted in the data that they had from UNC was names, address, phone number, date of birth, social security, medical information, Medicare, Medicaid ID numbers, and health insurance information. They are sending out notifications as well. So if UNC Health Southeastern is basically your health system, check in. And obviously UNC is a major health provider in the state of North Carolina. Moving on, let's go to our mini segment that simply is, if you just paid for cybersecurity, you wouldn't be getting breached and you wouldn't be losing your reputation. And first up, that really didn't have a good reputation before the breach, is Frontier. This is the massive cable company, and I hear nothing but complaints because, quite frankly, a lot of people don't think they're that good. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm also not one of their customers, so I'm not judging. I'm just telling you what I know. Now, they are now facing 3 class action lawsuits that I do know in relation to a cyber data breach that essentially resulted in the exfiltration of data. Now, the criminal gang Ransom Hub essentially hit the stole personally identifiable information of over 750,000 Frontier customers, and the lawsuit alleged that Frontier did not properly maintain and safeguard its computer systems and data, which is pretty fair point. Okay, so heads up to you if you are a subscriber to Frontier TV, cable, whatever Frontier does for you, heads up. Moving on, let's talk about the Onyx Group, LLC. They have decided or agreed to a payment of $1.25 million to settle allegations that they failed to protect and personal information of nearly 310,000 people that was exposed in a March 2023 data breach under a deal given initial approval in federal court. Now, class members would be able to receive up to $5,000 to basically cover documented losses related to the breach, 12 months of identity theft insurance, credit monitoring, all that kind of stuff, or a pro rata cash payment that essentially from the settlement funds remaining after deduction of other benefits, etc., etc. So if you use Onyx Group for all your Onyx needs, great rap band from the 90s, rap group, I should say, from the 90s. Go check it out, although I'm pretty sure that Sticky Fingers has nothing to do with this one. Moving on, Charlotte-based Truist Bank. Now, they are being sued by a group of customers who say that they failed to protect the personal information from attackers. Quote, "We're aware of and currently reviewing the filing, but we don't generally comment on pending litigation," end quote. That's according to a Truist spokesperson talking to local news in North Carolina. Now, customers claim their identities are at risk because essentially all of the pertinent information was stolen and essentially given up and failed to be protected by Truist Bank in 2023. So we'll see where that goes, but good luck to the class action. Moving on. Save RX. I literally just talked about these guys like a month ago or so. A class action lawsuit has been filed against A&A Services, a medication benefits management service provider that operates as Save RX, over their October 2023 data breach that affected 2.8 million individuals. This just recently came to light, for the record, because I seriously remember, and for the record, I remember talking about Truist Bank last year, but this one was much more recent. Now, around October 3rd of last year, the attackers accessed their network and exfiltrated files that was protected health information of employees and clients' health plans. So the breach was detected on October 8th, and by virtue of that, they discovered that essentially contact information, dates of birth, and social security numbers had been stolen. SaveRx says it was provided with the final results on April 30th, 2024, and they essentially started notifying on May 10th of this year, offering credit monitoring services. So, as I mentioned, this is a recent one that I was talking about in the last apparently month or two, not couple weeks. Moving on, Blackbaud. Yes, Blackbaud. I've been talking about Blackbaud. It feels like since almost the beginning of Breaches of the Week, but it's at least been a few years, and I've been doing this for years and years. So, with that, let's talk about Blackbaud, because they agreed to pay $6.75 million to settle alleged violations of HIPAA and essentially California data privacy laws as well, which is the crux of this particular lawsuit, of which they've had several lawsuits, but this one's based in California because they were breaking California data privacy laws. Now, Blackbaud provides data management software to nonprofit organizations, if you recall, and the software stores sensitive information like names, social security numbers, bank account, and medical information, depending on what you're putting in there. But it's usually, in my experience, I do have clients that use Blackbaud, and it's usually donor information, meaning I'm going to go donate to this charity, this institution, my alma mater, whatever it is, and boom, my info's in Blackbaud, as is my credit card, because I'm usually paying through it. So this obviously is a huge issue, and it really just underscores that if you are a major provider of something, you really need to take your security seriously. Otherwise, you're going to end up on this show, and Lord knows nobody wants to be here with me. I kind of don't, but it's a labor of love. And with that, that ends our mini segment. If they just spent on cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting sued, they wouldn't be losing millions, and they definitely wouldn't be losing their reputations. Moving on, back to regular breaches, we have a major U.S. printed circuit board assembly manufacturer known as Keytronic. Now, they just admitted to having their data compromised in a cyber attack in early May, weeks after more than 500 gigabytes of data purportedly stolen from them was exposed by the Black Basta ransomware gang. Now, infiltration of Keytronic systems on May 6 resulted in the exfiltration of personally identifiable information and other limited data. Now, that is according to their 8K filing with the Security and Exchange Commission, and they also noted that a complete restoration of their operations after a 2-week disruption of their facilities in both the United States and Mexico has now essentially been completed, meaning they are back online in both the United States and down Mexico way. Now, Keytronic has not provided any information regarding its attackers to their updated SEC 8K, but Black Basta has claimed to have exfiltrated 530 gig of data, all of which has already been exposed, including corporate finance, engineering, human resources details, and more. So heads up to you if you're a customer or work for Keytronic. They are not having a good 2024. Moving on, let's talk about Scout Energy Partners. On June 14th, they filed a notice of data breach with the Attorney General of California after discovering that an unauthorized party was able to access portions of the company network. Now, in this notice, Scout Energy Partners explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party being able to access consumers' sensitive information, which includes their names and social security numbers. Upon completing their investigation, Scout Energy has been sending out notifications as well. So, heads up to you if you use Scout Energy for all your energy needs. Moving on, let's talk about Apti Health. They're based out of Sarasota Springs, New York. They're a behavioral health engagement company, and they have confirmed that the protected health information of almost 20,000 patients has been either exposed or stolen. Now, this breach occurred at Syssense or C-Sense. This is a business associate of Apti Health that provides data analytics services. I actually talked about C-Sense, I want to say like a month or two ago. Now, in order to provide those services, C-Sense was given access to this kind of data, which includes protected health information. So another fallout from C-Sense, but Apti Health patients in Sarasota Springs, New York, heads up to you. Moving on. And I want to go down under and give you an update on Optus. If you remember and recall, this is one of the largest, if not the largest, data breach the entire country and continent of Australia have experienced. Now, Optus's, I can't speak today, customer data breach in 2022 was a result of a software vulnerability that had gone unnoticed for 4 years. This is according to the Australian regulator, ACMA, which essentially is the one that dove into this. Now, the agency filed a civil lawsuit against the telco over the hack, which it alleged was caused by a quote-unquote coding error that left the customer database open to attack. An Australian federal court filing on Wednesday, ACMA said Optus had failed to protect the confidentiality of quote-unquote personally identifiable information of around 3.5 million customers. That's obviously a massive breach for Australia, whose population I believe is around like 30 to 40 million. So that's a significant number, and that obviously is a huge, huge thing. And this all just really underscores the reason and the need to have things like vulnerability and penetration testing done on public-facing assets. If you're a telco, if you're a regular business, these are things that you should be having on a regular basis, and that's really the proof here. You don't want to be Optus, even if you're much smaller and you have a smaller footprint. You don't want to be them. Moving on. Let's head on over to the United Kingdom and talk about the Post Office of the United Kingdom, because they just apologized after they published the names and addresses of 555 postmasters that essentially was exposed during the Horizon scandal. Now, we'll talk about that in a second because I had to go look that one up too. Now, the company confirmed personal details had been shared in a document on its website and said that it referred itself to essentially the UK's watchdog, the ICO, or Information Commissioner's Office. Now, one former sub-postmaster said the breach had caused, quote, upset, distress, and anger, end quote, and added that the data leak was preventing people from trying to heal, end quote. Now, in response, Chief Executive Nick Reed apologized and said the leak was, quote, a truly terrible error, end quote. Now, it comes as witnesses continue to give evidence at an inquiry into the scandal, which saw hundreds of sub-postmasters prosecuted for theft between 1999 and 2015, when incorrect information from Horizon accounting software made it look like money was missing from their branches. In other words, as I was reading about this, if I'm the postmaster of local Hampshire or whatever, in like a local town or village or whatever, and essentially the software mistaked it, and it looked like I was ripping off the village when none of these postmasters were, and now they just went through a data breach as well. So, needless to say, the Post Office of the UK has had a pretty rough 30-odd years, and hopefully, quite frankly, they're going to get over it, but sucks to be a postmaster right now. I feel for you guys. Moving on. Let's head on back to the United States and head on down to head on down to Texas, next to Mexico, and talk about the Association of Texas Professional Educators, or ATPE. Now, they submitted filings with regulators on June 14th that said an incident affected 426,280 people, including members of their organization, employees, and their dependents. Now, ATPE represents nearly 100,000 teachers, administrators, and public education employees across the entire state of Texas. And so for everyone involved, we're talking social security numbers, dates of birth, and addresses being exposed in a cyber attack that was discovered on February 12th of this year. So for employees of ATPE only, the data breach also included passport numbers, driver's license numbers, financial information, and medical records. Now, members who joined before May 15th of 2021 also had their tax identification numbers leaked as well. Members who received payments from ATPE may have also had financial information leaked. So essentially, if you're a teacher and you're represented by the Association of Texas Professional Educators, y'all better check in. Moving on. Let's talk about software provider CDK Global. A cyber attack on software provider CDK Global upended the operations at car dealerships across the United States. Now, the company shut down most of its systems, quote, out of an abundance of caution, end quote, which is one of the most common things I see when I am talking about incidents and advising companies to use that as well if we are called for incident response. So out of an abundance of caution for their customers on this past Wednesday, and that's according to their spokesperson, Lisa Finney. Now, the company said that it restored some of its systems that afternoon, but the company shut down, quote, most of its systems, end quote, once again, after it was hit with an additional cyber attack later that evening, according to the letter that they sent to customers. Now, the company did not have an estimated time frame for when they would be back up and running. Dealerships continue to report issues with CDK systems on Friday. I do not know, for the record, what dealership. If we're talking about like, oh, every Toyota dealership or Honda or Subaru or GM or whatever, I don't know necessarily who uses them, but I suspect that we might start seeing disclosures from major car companies. And quite frankly, if you've ever walked into a dealership and bought a car in the United States or possibly the world, wherever CDK is, we all might be caught up in this, because Lord knows I've bought cars from dealerships before because, well, that's what most people do. And finally, let's talk about our finalies today. We've got two interesting ones here, and I really think it underscores a hacking group that I have talked about prolifically for the last year or so that has really been hitting the radar. And it's a group that I think has a huge issue in terms of, one, the optics of who they are, but two, the data that they are dumping out. And so with that, what we're going to be talking about is the group Intel Broker. Now, if you're a longtime listener, follower, radio show listener of mine, however you're consuming my content in some way, shape, or form, you know I've talked about Intel Broker on Breaches of the Week with a good amount of frequency. But we've got two big companies for you today that essentially they're talking about because Intel Broker is claiming to have hit them, and that is AMD and Apple. Now, here's what's going on. AMD, we're going to start with them, launched an investigation after essentially Intel Broker announced earlier this week on breach forums that they essentially said that they were selling AMD.com data breach, quote unquote. That is a verbatim quote, not bad English from me. Now, the data offered for sale from Intel Broker allegedly includes information on future AMD products, customer and employee databases, datasheets, source codes, property files, firmware, and financial documents. The employee database allegedly also includes information such as name, job role, phone number, and email address. Now, Intel Broker has made public several screenshots in an attempt to demonstrate these claims. The compromised files were allegedly tainted this month, June of 2024. Quote, "We are aware of a cyber criminal organization claiming to be in possession of AMD data." That's according to AMD themselves. I continue. "We are working closely with law enforcement officials and a third-party hosting partner to investigate the claim and the significance of the data," end quote. And when I first put that and compiled that in my notes, my first thought was, are they a customer of Snowflake? Because if they are, here we go. And so that's obviously a huge thing. But AMD's statement suggests that the data, if authentic, as I mentioned, could originate from a hosting provider as opposed to their own internal infrastructure as well. And so obviously I'm going to keep you up to date on that. Now, Apple also basically got caught up in this, and having posted to X, aka Twitter, about having access to the source code of 3 internal tools used at Apple, including a single sign-on authentication system known as Apple Connect, Intel Broker then had their Twitter account suspended. However, a posting on essentially breach forums and other dark websites essentially had repeated the claim along with essentially screenshots showing tools listed as Apple Connect SSO, Apple HWE Confluence Advanced, and Apple Macro Plugin. Now, breach forums posted by Intel, the post by Intel Broker stated, quote, "I am releasing the internal source code to 3 of Apple's commonly used tools for their internal site. Thanks for reading and enjoy, end quote. Now, an analysis of leaked code by a security team at cybersecurity consultancy HCTS revealed that the released code isn't actually the source code for internal tools themselves, but rather, and I quote, proprietary internal plugins and configurations that are used to connect Apple proprietary authentication systems to Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence for single sign-on authentication within the Apple corporate network. In other words, this is not something that Apple seems to be giving all of us. This is more of their internal tools of how they are connecting their customers to essentially those business platforms that are run by Atlassian, and Atlassian is a very huge player in that. Now, the highly technical analysis by that consultancy concluded that the leak of these custom plugins, quote, poses significant cybersecurity risks, end quote, but no Apple end user products or services are impacted, meaning this is internal to Apple essentially only. So if you're an iPhone user, MacBook, whatever, you can breathe easy. Now, the detailed configurations and sensitive information contained within the code could, according to them, potentially be exploited by malicious actors. So this really underscores, I think, one of those things where no company, too big or too small, and no matter how much they're rocking out security, and Apple is notoriously very private with their security controls, et cetera, not to mention their bugs. Their bug bounty program is pretty awful compared to most of the others because of that level of privacy. So when these things kind of leak out, that's obviously a huge thing. But it also speaks to the effectiveness of Intel Broker, who has leaked out a ton of stuff on governments, massive corporations, all this kind of stuff. Now, basically, Intel Broker, whether it's a single person or a group, whatever they are, their record is essentially, for the most part, pretty accurate to say, yeah, we actually did do this, and here's the proof. Some of it has been a bit of a hoax. And so we're going to see where this goes, especially on the AMD side, because if this Apple thing is pretty minor and it's been confirmed by a third party, then I'm less worried about that. But the point is that these groups are out here, they're sophisticated, they are continuing to move, and as I'm sitting here talking to you, and as you're sitting here listening to me in some way, shape, or form, people are getting hit, corporations are getting hit. It's a massive, massive problem. And so this is all the more reason why you need good security, good controls, good education. You've got to build in that resiliency, because God forbid it happens to you in your personal life or business life. Do you know if you can recover, rebound back? If your credit card is completely maxed, do you have no money? For a month while they're unsticking you? These are things that we need to consider. These are things that we need to be concerned about. So make sure you are considering and concerning yourself with them. And so with that, I'll leave you at that, get off my soapbox, but those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.